for making it possible to come and for attending this last session. I will just provide in a minute a brief overview of what we have discussed so far, and then talk about what we will cover in this last and final session. In the first panel discussion, we discussed subtitling, and in particular, same language subtitling, i.e., where the subtitling is in the same language as the underlying content for which the subtitling is provided. How we make that more widely available. What the role of different actors in that regard is. Sort of a clear enunciation of the problem and what each of us can do to make things better. The second discussion was on audio description, and we had at least what I thought was a really thoughtful and engaged discussion on the current challenges that we face in India and in the UK, because one of our panelists was from there, in terms of getting industry to make their content audio described, but also how far we've come, and what lessons India can learn from this experience, and sort of concrete pathways going forward in the next 5-10 years, how we can take it up in a phased manner through legislation, judicial intervention, policy intervention, and participation from industry. This final session will involve a discussion on accessibility standards that are currently being formulated to give effect to the mandate on media accessibility contained in the RPWD Act. Nirav Kumar Shah, who is co-led at the Billion Readers Initiative, will provide a summary of those standards, and then we will have some time for Q&A. Nirav, over to you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I hope all of you can see my screen. So, I'll be talking to you about the accessibility standards, which were passed in 2019. And they are for persons with disabilities. It's a little bit of a misnomer because it doesn't cover all the disabilities, and it's actually more focused on the deaf and the hearing impaired. So why was this policy created? Is largely for three reasons. Our constitution basically gives fundamental rights to the disabled, and they have to have access just as similarly as those who don't have any disabilities. Similarly, India has actually signed the United Nations Convention for Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And most importantly, the Indian government passed an act called the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Acts. So these three things largely guided the government to create a policy for television to make it more accessible to the hearing impaired. So a subgroup was created, which was led by the chairperson of Doordarshan. And after a few consultations, they came out with this policy. And I'm going to just explain to you the large points which are there in this policy. Now, the objective of the policy is to make TV content more accessible for the hearing impaired. And they have defined what is hearing impaired, and they have also defined what is the kind of access that they are talking about. So largely it's three kinds of access. One is subtitling, or what we like to call same language subtitling, where the subtitles are in the same language of the audio. Closed captioning, and also Indian Sign Language, or ISL. Now, one of the first things that the policy talks about is creating awareness. So largely the consumer should be told that they are going to get access to this kind of content, which will have accessibility features. They should come out with what they call EPGs, or electronic programming guides, and there should be very clear symbols that showcase that these programs have accessibility features. Another important point is basically all the service providers should be trained on dealing with customers who have hearing impairment. largely, like I said, there are three kinds of accessibility: SLS, closed captioning, and ISL. SLS and closed captioning are very related. SLS is basically subtitling in the same language, and closed captioning has subtitling in the same language plus the additional features of cues which are uh, audible, but you can't hear it. So they'll say the door opens, etc. Right, and of course ISL. Now, whose responsibility it is? So the government has very clearly stated that the responsibility lies with the content creators, and very rightly so, because the sooner in the production line you add accessibility features, the easier it becomes. So it's the responsibility of the content creators, and it's also the responsibility of the service providers. So in this case, basically the television channels, and also in parallel, it also goes with cable operators and those who are showing it. So it will be DTH operators, etc. Only if all of them come together, then we can get a accessible content. They've also defined what subtitles will be and it should be in which language. They said basically the channels can decide that it should be mostly in the language of the channel, which makes a lot of sense. Or in some cases, they can decide if it's a foreign language movie, you can subtitle it in English also. Then basically for sign language also, they are given very clear instructions that the focus should be that no, the hand should be very clear. Also facial expression should be clearly shown, and it should take roughly 1/6 of the screen. They have given some exceptions, very rightly so, saying that this should initially be done by those channels which are most popular because they have a higher reach and also will tend to be larger channels. So any channel which has less than 1% viewership is excluded for the moment. And there are certain kinds of contents which are excluded. So which is basically live programs, live event shows, live unscripted reality shows, etc. And the reason they have exempted this is because technology, especially in Indian languages, has a long way to catch up before subtitling can be done on the fly. So these will be included at a later level. The government has also suggested in the policy that all the channels should come out with should report how much of the content they are adding accessibility features to, and they have also put certain quality standards that they should maintain. Now, though largely this policy is for TV programs, they have used a very interesting phrase in this, which basically says that all the content which is once come on television with the help of mutatis mutandis, which means that by modifying it suitably, so on any other channel when it's shown, so when it's shown on OTT, streaming, etc., it should also come with the accessibility features which were there originally, which I think is a great move. We are asking the government to take it one step further and make the accessibility standards for OTT itself, because a lot of content today is being created for OTT, which is not coming on television. Of course, they have given guidelines for the equipment itself. They have given very detailed guidelines. So I've just written the main phrase in that one of the interesting features that they have put in this is basically they want the equipment, which would be the set-top box in this case, should be able to connect with the hearing aid. So it's a little far off. Our equipment is not designed for that yet, but this would be an extremely useful feature if that happens. One point they have put they have put actually 3 paragraphs on this is emergency information should be accessible. So for obvious reasons, basically any kind of emergency should be accessible in either. Right now they put either, but later they are going to say that it should be done also with captioning as well as sign language. Now, they have given a roadmap for the implementation. So the policy was started in 2019. At that time, roughly 5% of the content had to be with accessibility features. And we are now in 2022, roughly 30% of the content had to be with accessible features. The reality is it's less than 2%. And by 2025, roughly 50% of the content should have accessible features. We are very far from that. We were part of the committee which re-looked at this. So every 2 years, a committee has to look at this and suggest changes. And we have basically requested the government that, right now, given them a realistic picture, which also they are aware of, that hardly any subtitling is happening or ISL is being added, and that we should kind of do that a little faster. And so a new roadmap has been created. So hopefully the new policy will come out, the revised policy, and it will also get promulgated. Now, this was basically what we have done till now. The accessibility standards which are there 2019. And we were part of the core committee. We have given suggestions. We had spoken with Vidhi and other groups which represent the hearing impaired, and we have taken all of their comments and given it to the and we are not sure how much of it will get taken in, but right now all of it is with the government. And of course, implementation is key. TV channels are still not implementing. When the promulgation happens, we are sure things will start moving. So we are requesting the government to promulgate it at the earliest. One of the points which we made in our previous discussion, which was about an hour back when we were talking about subtitling and how it is not only for the DHH community, but it's also for the larger audience, because everyone has a certain stake in having subtitles or same language subtitling. Large groups of so-called literates are actually semi-literate, and by adding same language subtitles, all of these groups will benefit and become better readers. So this is the pitch we are making to the government. We are also making to the channels that listen. We are not only going to benefit the hearing impaired groups, they will definitely benefit in a big way, but even your core audience, like the ones whom you are thinking might get disturbed by it are not going to get disturbed. Our research shows more than 90% of the people like content with subtitles. So go ahead and do it. Everyone is going to benefit from that. We have done research for more than 20 years. And we have also basically said that the barriers for the producers is actually very less. For new content, it's nearly nothing, because they already have a script. From a script to closed captioning or SLS is a very small leap with nearly no expense. And for older content, we can work with them and create AI tools. Those tools already exist, but they have to be tailor-made to the kind of content. So if it's Hindi, we have to feed it thousands of hours of Hindi content. Similarly, for Tamil and other languages, once we feed those tools will become better, and it'll become cheaper and cheaper for channels to add subtitles on all their content. And lastly, we really want the accessibility standards to also be uh, applicable for streaming and OTT platforms. In the earlier session, we had shown a small clip with SLS. So before we take questions, I think all of us might enjoy one small clip of what SLS is about. So here you go. Before that, I'll show you, actually, we have done very detailed eye tracking research to show that basically viewers, when you add subtitles, how their eyes basically, their focus splits. They're not only watching the screen, they're also watching subtitles. So here is a small clip for that. And now a small clip of same language subtitling.
Is the clip playing, Nirav? I can't hear
Yeah.
it.
Oh, you're not seeing it? Okay.
Yeah, I can't hear
Okay.
it. If there's audio, at least I can't hear that.
Oh, okay. So I'm not sure why the audio is not coming, but see, this shows the power of SLS now.
Okay.
So anyway, so let's.
Uh,
I think we can stop the video for now,
hmm.
and now we can take questions. So thank you.
Yes. So I have a couple of questions just to kick us off. One is these standards were first put out in the public domain in September 2019, as I understand it, and yet
Right.
they have not been notified or promulgated yet. So today, if I am a hearing impaired user, I can't go to an authority and say that I have the right to demand that this content have subtitling, at least the content that should have it as per the guidelines, as per the standards. So, I mean, at this point, while great in theory, these are only on paper. So, what do we do as advocates who work in this field to actually ensure that these get notified and become legally enforceable? That is one question. And the second is, you mentioned about the statistics that, in fact, while the goal was to ensure that 30% content has subtitling by 22, we are only at 2% and nowhere close to reaching 15-25. What, according to you, are the key problems, key reasons for this, and what are the main ways to counter those challenges?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think both are great questions. So the first question is, how do you get the government to basically notify this? I think it has to be driven by those who are going to benefit most by this. So I think all the hearing impaired groups, if they were to reach out to the government and say, like, that you have this policy which has been there for 3 years. Why is this policy not being implemented? Why is it not promulgated? We are losing out. It's been 3 years. We have not been able to benefit from it. So, so I think one is definitely demand has to come in from there. Similarly, I think the pressure has to also go on to TV channels. I think if TV channels come to know that large sections of the audience are wanting this, right? They are doing it in a small way. But if they come to know large sections want it, then they will basically increase it, regardless whether there is whether the government is promulgating it or not, right? So I think there has to be two pronged pressure, both to the government as well as the private sector. Please start doing this. I see that as one of the solutions. I'm not sure. They could be other ways, but I think Vidhi, you guys are the legal guys. You need to look at how else this could be done. But largely, I think if the audience were to ask for it, private channels would definitely come on board, and I'm sure the government has been quite receptive in certain things with Sugamya Bharat, etc. That it's trying to make efforts to really get the accessibility mainstream, but I don't know where the stumbling block is for this policy, and we would really want that to come as soon as possible. And because I think millions, or in fact hundreds of millions of people are going to benefit from that. And
The
the
standards, the
bottlenecks,
accessibility.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes. So now the bottleneck, I think from the private sector side, why is it they are not doing it? Our conversation with them has revealed largely their concern has been about money. So they're saying that it's
Mm-hmm.
going to cost too much. And our discussion with them has been exactly that listen, for new content, it's going to be nearly nothing. And they accept that, right? For new
Mm-hmm.
content. So for new content, there isn't even an argument. They know that if basically, and that is what they have started doing. I mean, if basically some streaming platforms, if you see like Netflix, has
Mm.
started doing that. So if you see some of the newer shows which are there in Netflix in the last 1 year or so, even though the policy doesn't apply to Netflix, I'm actually very happy that they have taken a lead in a certain sense. and some of the newer movies, especially Netflix originals, have same language subtitling, right? So I think I mean, congratulations to that. But and all the Netflix did was basically, whoever they are telling to do this, they said we want it with this added component that we want with same language subtitling, right? And so in the list of things they wanted, they just added this as an issue thing, and all the content, new content that comes with same language subtitling. Similarly, I think all channels, if they were to ask the producers, listen, you are giving me the video, you are giving me images, etc., for promo, all I'm asking you is give me the subtitle text, right? So it's an SRT file or a VTT file, give me that text. Then it becomes very straightforward for the television channel to show it. Right now, they can show it as open captioning, wherein it's just burnt onto the video. But as technology evolves, and I think we are very much there, we are on the cusp of that, you can allow it as an optional feature. Like, it can be closed captioning, you turn it on or off. So that's that.
Right.
And for older content, like I said, older content is, there is a certain expense to it. And I mean, for existing content, but we can work with different TV channels. And I think close to 1,000 or 2,000 hours of content will help us create an AI which is going to reduce their cost for subtitling drastically. So that's definitely a solution for private broadcasters to do.
Right. Great. Are there any other questions, Keshav? In the chat or the question box? I couldn't see any.
There is a question from Preeti, the ISL interpreter. So, Preeti,
Kindly
if you
read that
want to
out.
ask your
Or Preeti, you can ask, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Keshav, just to give me this opportunity. Actually, I just sharing my own experience because I worked in 2019 when this guidelines was declared. So I got a call from the News 24 and the News Nation. So I was used to interpret once in a week, basically on a Sundays in a News 24. Then later on, they just said they have the budget issue as well as because of the guidelines and the pressure they have started. But after 1 month, they just stop it. They're not doing anything. And I was really working on News Nation for the 6 months continuously. They are doing this for the 7 days in a week. So, but the problem is they are telecasting this news only for 2 to 5 minutes maximum. 5 minutes, I think. So that was the time, just for the 5 minutes. And they said they're going to increase it. But it was not happen. And I also noticed one more thing: all these news channels are telecasting their special bulletins on the particular time. That's not a peak hours. That nobody's would, everyone is busy in their job. It's at 2:30. The same time Z News is telecasting, the same time News Nation, News 24, even in the CNN. All these news channels are telecasting at the same time because that's not a peak hours. Nobody's available to see the TV. So that's the one thing. How can we change it? And DD News is really doing very well. They are start telecasting the news in evening hours also. They increase the timing now. That's a very good thing. But apart from that private channel, they stop it. They just taking a benefit, like they just repeating the news, the special bulletin which were telecasted in the early morning news of the DD News, or they are just doing the some closed captioning. That's it. So how can we, sensitize them, and we just pressurize them just to restart that work which they have initiated in 2019.
Right.
Yeah. No, no, so it's a good point, Preeti. I think you are just illustrating the fact that all channels are doing lip service right now, right? They're doing the very minimal they can. So if the government asks, have you done anything? They can say, yes, we have, right? And they are taking it off peak hours. I mean, it's basically just to check a box, like, just to have the very minimal that is done. And you are right, actually, Doordarshan definitely for sign language has been the forerunner, and there's no doubt about that. And I think promulgation is the only way, because I don't think somewhere either there has to be a movement where more of the deaf and hearing impaired groups really start getting behind this, because now you have a policy in place, right? It's not like nothing, it's something which is on the verge of so if you can push for it and ask for it, and I think that would be the only solution. The government has nearly done all its work, and it's only about them releasing it and promulgating it. Then actually the work is done, and then all of us can start questioning the private channels. Like, the Preeti, the question you asked then becomes even more relevant. Like, no, you are supposed to do X amount, why is it not happening? And so unfortunately we are in that state right now, where because it's not promulgated, it's not enforceable. So we have to, just make do with what they have done.
There is one question just now it has come in on whether there are guidelines of this nature for social media content also, because they also need to do it, and it's not clear how far they are doing it. So are there guidelines on this that you're aware of, Neerav?
I'm aware of guidelines which are there. In fact, I think Rahul, you and I had also discussed about it. Guidelines which are there for all content that is posted on the internet, and it's not social media specific. And it's like things they are all required to have all text and things like that. There are guidelines which are there. I'm not sure there is a policy, but there are guidelines which have been released a while back. I'll have to look and find
So
exactly
those
what.
are on, yeah.
Yeah,
So those are
yeah,
actually on platform accessibility, Neerav,
correct.
in terms of saying that, look, you have to make your platform disabled friendly. But on things like image description, subtitling, like there's nothing right now that can
Nothing right
require
now.
a YouTube, for
No,
example, when it puts up its videos, or Instagram when it puts out its reels to say that these must be audio described and
no,
subtitled.
not at all. Definitely no.
So there is
For
a
that,
need
there
for,
isn't anything.
so
No.
the government does have the power under Section 40 of the RPWD Act to formulate accessibility standards on ICT related services and products also. So if there is a concerted push in that direction, we can get the government, urge the government to do something about it. But right now there isn't. And Preeti, you said something about advertisers. Would you just like to say that?
Yes, actually, when I was working, so I just asked them, what happened, why they stopped just telecasting this special bulletin. So they have given the reason. They are also, required the funding from the advertisements. So the different companies are giving their advertisement in between that show or the in between the news. That's the main funding for them, from which they can pay us. So if this is not there, so they are not able to, continue more for this. So that the private channels are giving the reason. So what's
That
the solution
people
for?
that
Yeah.
people who are funding them are no longer willing to do so. That's
Yes.
the argument. Okay.
Yes.
And see, I mean, Neerav, keen to hear your inputs on this, but my sense is that, we need to hold them to account. Like, if this kind of thing is happening, if 50 hearing impaired people write to News National or News 24/7 and say, look, I used to be able to enjoy this service. If we start a petition on change.org, if we tag them on Twitter and LinkedIn, then they will take notice, because which business would not want to, would want to come across as not being disabled friendly in today's day and age, or not respecting the diversity of its consumers in today's day and age. It would be a self goal for them to do that.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point, because they are just depends on the viewers. If there's a less
Yeah.
viewers, then why we advertise our product?
Yeah, so I think we need to really mobilize and leverage the people who are accessing this kind of content, and activate them into actually taking this up with service providers whenever that is what, at least from my work on digital accessibility, that I am kind of doing, to really foreground the voices of users with disabilities. Because very often what I find is that people just, and for good reason, right? They just don't have the time to be able to complain about all the thousands of barriers that they confront. So they just sort of, okay, nahi hai to nahi hai, chodo pare. Like, who has the energy to take it up? But some people need to act as conduits who can connect these end users with service providers and tell them that this matters. You better do it. Whether or not it's a legal obligation, whether you can be fined for it, different matter. But why should things even have to reach there? Nirav?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And one of the points actually which was raised by the broadcasters was that if basically they can use CSR money for adding sign language or adding same language subtitling. And I think that could be a possible idea also the government could look at, is allowing CSR funding, because CSR funding for accessibility in other sectors has been allowed. If they could allow it for this, it might also take out one of the points they have about it, like costing money. So that could be something the government can consider. We have put it as a suggestion also, and let's see.
So right now, Nirav, in the seventh schedule, which sets out the list of CSR activities that can be conducted, disability-related expenses are not directly part of that, right?
You'll know better than me,
No,
Rahul.
my understanding is that it's not. So you'd have to
Okay.
channel it through some other, like there are some other provisions generally on welfare related measures. So
Yes.
there you can put it in, but there's nothing specific
So
on accessibility or disability even.
no, so what happens is like creating ramps, like creating infrastructure, those kind of
Huh,
things is allowed, right? So now this is digital infrastructure, right? So that's the
huh,
logic that you follow. I
huh,
mean, so right now if you are creating ramps, you can take that as
huh,
I mean, that is very clearly allowed. Or if
huh.
you are running schools or any
Hmm.
of those kind of things are allowed under CSR.
So
And
why not
honestly,
this?
accessibility
Hmm.
could very easily,
Hmm.
like fall into that, but someone has to
Hmm.
make that argument very clearly. That's it.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a big one. I think,
Mm.
even if there is one thing we take away from this, it could be that, like how do we put together a coherent, well thought out policy brief saying that the CSR provisions in the Companies Act should be amended to bring in accessibility within them. And that can be a real game changer, because if that becomes a permitted activity, and given how much money Indian corporates have that they spend on CSR and are bound to, and for good reason, it can actually be a real game changer, because a lot of this comes down to cost, as discussions across panels today reveals. So I think that's definitely something that I would like to work on, and that's one takeaway that I personally extracted from this. We are unfortunately out of time. It is 8:04 p.m. as Keshav has politely reminded me. So we must bring this session to a close now, and the workshop in its entirety. It's been a wonderful opportunity for me personally. Although we had few people in attendance, quantitatively the turnout may not have been very high, but I felt that the quality of the discussion was very high. We heard really insightful inputs from people who are at the cutting edge of the work on audio description, subtitling, and SLS. And it really gives me, personally speaking, the motivation as well as the know-how to pursue this kind of work with even more vigor, and to redouble my efforts to sort of work in that direction. So my profound thanks to Nirav Kumar Shah and colleagues at the Billion Readers Initiative for helping me put this together, helping us put this together, to Preeti and Atul for their sign language assistance, as always, to Pooja for expertly moderating the first discussion, notwithstanding the last minute hiccups that came that had to be dealt with, and to Preeti Soni, Surabhi, Sonali Rai, and Dipendra Minocha for their excellent contributions, and to Keshav for finally logistically putting all of this together. It's not easy, to design a workshop of this nature. You have to make sure that all the pieces line up. So thanks very much, Keshav. So, and with that, it's a wrap. If you are interested in pursuing this work further, in contributing, and every voice matters, every small little contribution that you can make matters. You can write to me personally on rahul.bajaj1038@gmail.com or on rahul.bajaj@vidilegalpolicy.in, and I can connect you with relevant stakeholders, and we can explore opportunities to collaborate. Thanks very much. Thank you, Nirav.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Vidhi.
Bye-bye.
Absolute pleasure.
Yes, thank you.